Hi everyone, this is Hoke Smith with Nuix, and in this short video I wanted to address a question that I frequently get regarding our endpoint detection and response product called Nuix Adaptive Security. And this is really around the amount of network traffic that our agent generates back to the server. A lot of folks are appreciative of the visibility that endpoint detection tools can provide, but they're wary of the amount of network traffic that gets generated and the implications that that has both on the performance of the network and for back-end storage requirements. So this is something that our engineering team understood from the beginning of creating the product, and in order to deal with it, they've created a high degree of configurability in terms of what can be basically what the agent can be instructed to send back to the server. And that's recognizing that there's a range of different use cases that security needs to be prepared to confront, from a situation where a system is virtually known to be compromised, and so there's a need for to quickly see basically everything that's going on the system at one end of the spectrum, to the other end of the spectrum where there's a need to alert on suspicious behaviors, but because of the condition of the network or systems on it, there's a need to keep the amount of additional network traffic that is generated to an absolute minimum. Now, both those things are possible within Adaptive. So let's take a look at that and how that actually looks in the software. So we configure this forwarding using logic engine rules. And so I'm going to show you a configuration or a profile here called alert full forward. And alert full forward is forwarding in sort of the traditional EDR kind of scenario. It's sending back every possible event that it's capable of recording from the endpoint. So if we look in forward and suppress rules, we just see these basic rules that say, yes, forward every time there's a process event, session event, media, every time there's a file rename, write or delete, etc., objects, threads, even down to registry events. So all of that is being sent back to a server immediately. Again, this is the kind of config that you might use in a case where you had a machine or a small number of systems that were expected compromised, and we needed to get a very great degree of resolution into everything that's occurring on them. So let's take a quick look at the kind of network traffic that's being generated when we are in this deployment scenario. And to do that, I've just installed Wireshark here on my Adaptive server, and I'm going to look for, I'm going to capture packets that are to port 6443, and we will take a look at what's happening in this forwarding everything kind of scenario. I'm just going to filter down, do a conversation filter with my endpoint, between my endpoint and server on TCP, and then let's look at the endpoint statistics. Now you can see just since I started the packet capture, there's already a skyrocketing number of packets here. We're almost up to a meg in terms of total bytes. We can see that most of the, of course, transmittal is being done by the endpoint back here to the server, which is receiving all of this information. So here we're at about a meg and a half just in this brief period of time that we're looking at this. So let's stop this and take a different approach. And I'll just clear out Wireshark here. And we'll go back to our console and change our strategy here. So we could go down all the way to alert only. And in the alert only scenario, we're only going to send back alerts. We're not going to send we're not going to actually forward any events. It's only if we believe something is extremely likely to be malicious, or we know it's malicious, that we would send it back. But in another case, we might say that there's some information that we actually do want to have back from the endpoint. We still want to forward some data back just to provide us context. So let's take a look at a config that does that, and I've got a few here. Alert no forward actually is the one I just referenced. So alert no forward will say only send back alerts, no other data. Alert does send some information back. Let's take a quick look at what it's sending. And again, we'll go to the forward and suppress rule set. So now we're sending back just process, session, and media events in addition to alerts. We're also going to send print events, and we're going to suppress some information entirely. If it's registry events that reference certificate lookups, and if it's object or thread events, we're going to suppress that information. And that will actually provide a significant benefit in itself, just in itself, without doing any additional kind of tailoring to the forwarding that we're doing. So let me push this alert config out to my endpoint. And we can do that just simple right click here, assign profile. And it'll take just a moment to actually push out. Okay, so our Windows 7 machine is now running this alert profile, and it'll generate an alert here. If I run the whoami command from the command line, we're interested potentially in bad guys doing some recon on the network, so we want to see that. And there's my whoami alert based on the process there. It's telling me that there's a user account identification incident on the endpoint. So let's look now at Wireshark and see what kind of network traffic is being generated. Again, we'll look at port 6443. And I'll filter down to conversation. And we'll look at our statistics. Okay, so already you can see that there's a dramatic difference in the amount of traffic that's being generated. Only 4 packets for a total of 800 bytes at this point. So we've virtually silenced the endpoint just by making those basic configuration changes to the profile. So hopefully what this gets across is the amount of configuration that you can do and the ease with which you can limit the amount of net flow that is being created on your network. So if there are systems or portions of the network where you need to minimize traffic, you can easily do that with this kind of configuration. So if the numbers are of interest to you, you'll be interested to see this. So in a 5-minute test, these are some benchmarks that we did recently to compare the amount of traffic that's being generated to a between a Windows 7 system and our server in a 5-minute time span. And you can see at the extreme end, when we're running in the traditional EDR configuration, we're sending everything back, we generated 10 megabytes of data in a mere 5 minutes. But at the other end of the extreme, where we are alerting only, there's no forwarding going on, we're only doing an occasional heartbeat. In about 5 minutes, we generate 1.5K per endpoint. Now going up into the alert scenario where we're beginning to forward some information, it gets to about 20K in the space of 5 minutes. And if we wanted to run in a mode where we're providing our security operators a large amount of contextual information, perhaps for our own backend analytics or for analytics in another system, then in this basic configurations here, we're generating around 418, 420K every 5 minutes. But I'll just quickly show you, if we wanted to sort of go into this assuming that this was the scenario that we wanted to run by default, then we could look at tailoring this even further and getting down to a more precise forwarding strategy to really send back items that we don't know for sure they're malicious, but we want them to provide context. So under the alert most forward config here, we can do that very, very easily by going into the profile, looking again at our forward and suppress rules. And I'm going to grab some engine filter language information here. And I'm going to focus on one event type that tends to generate a lot of information, which is image loads. And I'm going to change my policy from sending every time there's an image or a DLL load back to the server to only sending back DLL loads that have questionable signature status. So send back the DLL load event if it has an invalid signature or no signature at all. And to do that, I just add this string in, ensure that it compiles in the filter editor here, and save it. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to change my alert most forward profile to an even lower NetFlow generating configuration. So we should see this 418K drop down significantly even from here. Now hopefully what this gives you is a good sense of the kind of dials and knobs that are available to you in the Adaptive Security product to control the amount of network traffic and storage requirements that are necessary in order to still get a high degree of visibility and security in the enterprise.